When I was a young boy, I had the privilege of going to the Normandy beaches in France around 1965, I think it was. And while I was there, I was able to visit where D Day took place and where the Allies and the American forces, all that came ashore. Many Americans died there. And in 1944, Eisenhower, who was in charge of D Day invasion, had to make a decision as to whether they should go or not. The problem was that the weather was really bad. And it was so bad that the landing crafts were not going to be able to land the way they wanted to. And I thought, many people probably get seasick crossing the channel. So he delayed the decision to go, and a couple of days later, on I think it was June 6, 1944, the meteorologist told him that he had a little window if he wanted to take advantage of that. Meanwhile, the soldiers, they're getting a little nervous because they've been sitting around and waiting, and they know that they're about to go in there, do this invasion, and they don't know if they're going to live or die. So Eisenhower makes the decision, let's go. In a tough spot. The disciples found themselves in that spot too, in John chapter 6. And that's what we're going to talk about today. A lot of people talk about Jesus walking on water, but they miss the whole point of what really happened there. This is going to be the fifth sign that Jesus does. The first sign that he did was he turned water into wine, okay? Remember, the whole book of John, and I keep saying this over and over, is to let people know that Jesus is God. He's the Messiah. He's the Christ. And John wrote selected events to prove that, okay? Jesus is making this public presentation in the first part of John to demonstrate that he's God, and that if you put your trust in him, you're going to have eternal life. He's making that appeal first and foremost to the nation of Israel. They're going to reject him, and then he's going to change his strategy towards the second half of the book. But nevertheless, all through, he's trying to elicit the fate of the disciples. Okay, the first thing he did was turn water to wine, which demonstrated his power over natural elements. He then healed a nobleman's son, and he did it from a distance. He didn't have to be there. He told the nobleman, go, your son was healed. He then healed the paralytic, and he'd been sick for 30 some years, and he showed that he had power over sickness. He then fed the 5,000 people, and as I shared in the last message, there was many more than 5 people, probably anywhere from 20 to 30,000 people, because they just counted the men. And he showed that he had power over scarcity. You think you didn't have any food? We only got a couple of loaves of bread and a few fishes, and yet he fed them all, and there was food left over. Now he's going to walk on water. And he's going to show the disciples that he has power over physics. Okay, he has power over the laws of nature. Now, in order to really understand this passage, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a section from a person that has a lot of insight on that area. So you can understand what was going on in the disciples' mind, why they even put themselves in such a position on the Sea of Galilee, okay, where Jesus is going to meet them walking on water. Okay, so let me read this little section to you first. When Jesus was praying in the mountains alone, the disciples waited for him near the shore. The boat was packed and ready to go to the trip to Capernaum. The not yet in verse 17 that the disciples were expecting him to join them. Their anxiety was increasing as the time passed because he had not come and the wind was rising, probably a lot like those soldiers were on D-Day. The Lake of Galilee was situated below the sea level on a bow in the hills, and the valleys between the hills acted as chimneys which directed the concentrated blast of wind down upon the water. So you can just imagine all the wind and all this. And these are fishermen. They've been on that sea many a time, so they know what was happening. In addition, because of the relatively shallow depth of the lake, it was subject to sudden violent storms that were the terror of the fishermen who ventured upon it. The disciples, expert sailors that they were, knew the signs of the weather and were doubtless desirous of making the crossing to Capernaum before the storm broke, or before the wind made progress impossible. When they saw that the sea was rising and that Jesus had not come, and here's what this message is all about, they had to make a decision. Do we go or not? Sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you need to do something right away. You got to decide. What were the disciples counting on? What were they using for information to get them to decide what to do? Their experience as fishermen on the lake, logic, the weather conditions. I believe Jesus waited in those hills and he didn't come so that they would make that decision to go out there, even though they knew that danger was there and things probably weren't going to end the way they thought. Let me continue reading, see what happened. The failure of Jesus to meet them must have been disheartening. The difficulty of rowing would make their plight all the worse. Mark and Matthew say that it was about the fourth watch of the night when Jesus appeared. John states that they had rowed over not more than 30 furlongs or 3 3/4 miles from the point of departure in a period of 9 hours. It took them 9 hours to go that far. Okay? Threatened with exhaustion, they would have been at the mercy of the waves. If it had not come soon, apart from Jesus, they were lost. They were in trouble. And a very good chance of losing their lives, all of them. Why did they go? Why didn't they wait for Jesus to show up? You know, I've been in that spot before where I've had to make a decision, and you don't want to make the wrong one. You know, we've been pressured all this past year by government officials and different people making decisions for us. I filled up my tank today, and it was twice what it was 2 weeks ago. You know? And I don't want to put myself under people to make foolish decisions. When Eisenhower made the decision to go on D-Day on June 6, these were men that had a godly desire to see the war end. In fact, when President Roosevelt at the time announced to the United States that D-Day had begun, he didn't say it like a speech. It was said that he said it like a prayer. God help these boys. We have Biden and Kamala Harris. She's talking about passing a bill for lesbian, gays, transgender, and all that while this massive war is taking place from Russia invading Ukraine, because we got leaders now that could care less about God's standard of morality or God's standard whatsoever. I see Pelosi doing this stuff at the State of the Union address, and I recognize that she's as arrogant as can be, along with Biden and the Democrats that voted and applaud them. You know what the problem is? is that they don't consider God in the process of making tough decisions. So we're going to pay for that now. Okay? As we're already doing in gas and higher prices and inflation and people losing their lives overseas. You know, I honestly believe the election was rigged. But a lot of people say, no, man, he really had 80 million votes. Well, then we got 80 million idiots in this country that don't know their right hand from their left. Or maybe God's allowing this to give them a wake-up call that freedom is not free. And if you don't have people in the right position that know how to make good decisions at a tough time, in a crisis time, you're in real trouble. Real trouble. We don't know what can happen. It only takes one little incident to, you know, to blow this whole world apart. I hope when these truckers go up there to Washington, they do something a little more than just say, hey, we need freedom from masks. We need freedom from these scoffers in the Bible and Proverbs. And I've been saying this for years, that the only solution with people like this is to take them out of office, drive them out. You know, there is no other solution for them. And the Bible makes it clear that a righteous man leading, people have peace and they're joy and they're prosperous. But you put wicked people in power and they get power crazy. They don't care about the people. Putin doesn't care about the Ukrainians or even the Russian people. He just cares about his ideology. Biden, I don't know what he's thinking. Pelosi and Schumer and all those other Democratic leaders that are so stupid is beyond me. Why they would empower Russia to make money off of oil and gas and cut ours to make us dependent on them, which fuels this war and all these kids getting killed and all this craziness is utterly beyond me. But it's everybody that voted are complicit to that for those fools. I'm glad my dad isn't around. You see, the military leaders that we have today are just a joke. You know, they got no balls. And not like our founding fathers. They would have taken them out and had a duel. We need to replace these people. If not quickly with this vote, just run them all out of office. You know, some way or another. But this is the fifth sign that Jesus is given to the disciples. And when you're in a tough position like they are in, or we're in this country, you have to look to God for a solution. They weren't thinking when they were out there in trouble that Jesus was going to come walking on water to them and still the storm. That never entered their mind, the solution that God had for them in their difficult situation. Let me tell you something. If there's anything that's ever going to happen with this country good, we have to remove these wicked people out of office, and you have to replace them with people that care about God and His Word and that want to see justice done. There isn't a lot of justice in this country anymore. Our whole judicial system is corrupt. Okay? From the Supreme Court all the way down to our lower courts, all the way to our law enforcement agencies like the FBI and CIA and all them, they're all corrupt. Are there a lot of good people in them? Yes. And a lot of them are scared for their jobs. And I understand that. They got families, they got bills, they got to pay. But you know what? At what point are you willing to say, hey, you know what? No amount of money and job is worth me giving up my integrity and my life to a bunch of evildoers that could care less about me. Ukraine is not free from faults like any other country, but they want to be part of Europe. They want to be free, and I I admire that. There's a lot of people willing to die for freedom. We have people in America that have never did anything for their freedom. They're experiencing the blessing of it that God has given us on the sacrifice of others, not on their sacrifice. So instead of being thankful and using their freedom in a responsible way, they abuse it, and that's why they're more caught up with these woke agenda. We can be any gender we want. And talking about teaching critical race theories and black reparations and all this other nonsense that we had nothing to do with. If you really knew anything about all that and the history of it, you'd come to recognize that most of that was not even done by white people. It was done by Muslims. Okay? And yeah, there were some that held slaves and all that and everything, but they weren't the ones that initiated. Maybe a lot of blacks sold their own blacks. That's still going on in Africa. Okay? Hispanics and Portuguese, they were involved in it too. So... But, there's a lot of countries, it's like somebody said, it's not who reads history, it's who writes it. What the best history book in the world is the Bible. Because there's no lies in it. Everything that is in there is true. And if you want to experience Jesus doing the kind of miracles he did when he walked on water, you're going to have to get on your knees and go to him. Believe it in your heart and coming to him like the disciples did when they said, Lord, save us. They didn't have to say any eloquent prayer, but save us. Well, this country has no future, nor the other ones as well. I'm tired I've been in these churches, my goodness, and most of these pastors are cowards. They won't speak up and say anything, for fear of losing their job. And for fear of what is everybody going to say? Well, who could care less? What's important is, what does God think? What can man do to you? Listen, Jesus said, all authority on heaven and earth is mine. He said in the very beginning, go and have dominance. He already gave it to us. Why should we subjugate it over to another organization or authority that could care less about God? It makes no sense to me. None. When I was younger, I didn't care about politics. I didn't care about anything except my own selfishness, playing sports or doing different things. I don't know why I'm so caught up in this now, other than, what I'm really concerned for? It's not patriotism. I just want to see God in his rightful place in the world. He's king. He's Lord. I want to see Christians standing up for their faith with courage and not being afraid or intimidated by, reprobates and not laying down to them. And that's what they'll do. They'll try to shame you. They'll try to call you names. They'll just do everything like that, and they shut you up. They're bullies. But you got to stand up to them, You answer a fool according to a fool. Otherwise, they'll think they're wise in their own eyes. So here's Jesus. And what do you think the disciples thought when they got to the land? And they're sitting there thinking that Jesus had just walked on water, still the storm. I'd have done anything to have been there and experienced that. But you don't have to wait or hope about that. You can experience that today. Jesus is still performing miracles today. And he wants to perform one in your life as he's performing many miracles in the lives of the Ukrainians and the Russians overseas right now, and many other the people that are involved. Need to pray for peace, need to pray for Israel. Need to pray that God would remove these wicked people from office and replace them with people, men and women that truly care about justice truly care about doing the right thing in the right way. And I think when we do that, then we can have a mass revival again. If not, it's gone, it's lost. We're going to lose that window. Okay. When you're in a tough spot, like the disciples were, don't just look to science. Don't just look at the weather report. Pray and ask God, God, what do we do? Do we go or do we wait? Do we make this decision now? Do we make it doing these things or do we wait? Well, it's thankful we have God's Word, His Holy Spirit, and His wise Christian brothers and sisters that can advise us so that we can make right decisions so that we don't find ourselves in an ocean or a sea or a lake in the midst of a storm getting ready to drown, which is where this country is right now. God help us.